Hello there, people of the internet. I want to talk to you guys about something because there's a lot of people who fantasize about it. And it normally boils down into something along the lines of I am going to drop absolutely everything in my life right now and go live in the woods and just essentially live the frontier lifestyle. And whenever I talk about these topics, I get a bunch of people who tell me that I haven't been there and done that, but I have actually lived that frontier lifestyle for actually many years. It was a little while ago at this point, but I do know some things from my time of essentially living off the grid. And there's a lot of things that people don't take into consideration. Normally, whenever people think about dropping everything and going to stay in the woods, that's about as far as they get. They're like, I know there's a bunch of deer and squirrel and fish and whatnot out there, so I will have all of my needs taken care of. If we're talking about some kind of apocalyptic end of the world situation, then I hate to tell you, but those woods are going to be overran with a lot of people. But to live the frontier lifestyle, you're not picking to go out and live essentially off the grid just because of some obscene force that probably will never show up making you do that. You're doing that because that is a decision that you make that you want to do because that is a lifestyle that you want to live. And that is what we're going to be talking about here. We're not going to be talking about dodging radiation or dealing with paratroopers jumping down from the sky or whatever falsehood of a situation it is that you want to implement in this particular story. We're going to go ahead and talk about what really goes into living a frontier lifestyle, and it really depends on where it is that you live. For me, I've basically been in Florida for my entire life, so the southeastern area of the country is where I am most familiar with. If you're up in Alaska or somewhere like that, of course, you're going to have completely different needs and necessities than what it is that I'll be talking about here. So first things first, in Florida, if you want to go out and do whatever kind of hunting or fishing or anything it is that you're wanting to do, you need a license, because if a game warden comes across you and you're doing whatever it is that you're wanting to do, but you're doing so illegally, maybe you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. Everywhere has, basically all property has some sort of owner attached to it, whether or not it's the state that owns it or some sort of private ownership from wherever. If somebody comes across you and notices that you're not supposed to be there, then that might cause you some issues. So maybe you want to go ahead and get your own piece of property, in which case you would need a lot of money. So you already want to live a life to where you're not being noticed. That means that you can't go down wherever it is you're going, chop down a bunch of trees, build yourself a log cabin, clear out a bunch of space, and just live happily la-di-da-di-da because somebody probably owns that property. Now let's say you still manage to do that and you get away with it. No game wardens find you, no one knows you're on their property, you just have the perfect spot picked out and you're like, I'm going to go over there, clear myself out a piece of land. No one will ever notice any smoke billowing from any fire, or no one will ever know I am there. In which case, fantastic. I'm glad that you got yourself a good spot. And by this point, people are normally thinking, I'm going to go out there with whatever style of firearm it is that they decide to pick, because that is just their fantasy preference. They want to pick that particular gun and go out into the woods and do whatever it is that they're wanting to do. Get yourself a 308 or a 30-30 or 44 Magnum or Mosin Nagant, or like take your pick on what it is that you decide to go out there with. And wonderful. I am glad that you are having the time of your life. Now, how are you getting out to this place that nobody is going to know you're there? Once you get there, like, you're probably going to end up just having to carry whatever it is that you have on your back. Once you get there, what kind of supplies do you have to be able to build whatever shelter it is that you need to build? How cold is it going to get? How hot is it going to be? How many calories are you going to burn while you're setting up your camp or your shelter or whatever it is that you're doing? Then how easy is it to get whatever game it is that you're going to be going after? Bear in mind that going out to gather game, you're probably going to use a gun. Gonna make some noise. Somebody might hear. They might discover that you're out there being someplace that you're not supposed to be. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, because if somebody catches you and authorities show up, then I hate to tell you, but you're probably done living the frontier lifestyle, especially if you're not supposed to be there. So maybe going out with a 30-06 bolt-action rifle might not be the best idea. You might be better off going out with something nice and quiet, like, say, 22 long rifle. You can carry a lot of this. Of course, you got to remember the downsides of 22. It's unreliable and not very powerful. If you get, say, a bear that comes up to you, 22 long rifle might not be reliable enough to be able to stop that threat, and you're living off the grid. So if that bear just so much as scratches you, guess what? You're dying from infection, which is another thing we got to get into. How much medical supplies are you getting? How much medical supplies are you bringing to whatever camp it is that you have set up? How far are you going to be traveling to get to that particular camp? How much weight can you carry? How far can you walk? There's so many things that go into just getting to the location itself, and then you have to focus on the self-sustainment of that location. Can you make your own gunpowder? Can you make your own projectiles? Is there rock around you to where you can do something to maybe load a muzzle loader that perhaps you brought with you? What do you have to be able to keep these things running to the point to where you no longer have to rely on the grid? Because if you run out of ammo for your firearm, then you basically just have a club. So that's one of the reasons why I make my own gunpowder. This right here is some gunpowder that I'm actually planning on loading into some cartridges. I make my own gunpowder. I cast my own bullets. I reload my own primers. Do I have my kit around here? I do not. I was going to show you guys how I reload my own primers, but I don't got that. So let's say you get there, you settle in, you got yourself a fair amount of, I don't know, 22 long rifle, and you're completely surrounded by squirrels, right? Are you in a rainy area? Are you high up off the ground or low down on the ground? How easy will it be to gather water? How long will the water sit? Will it turn stagnant? Do you have to worry about having a fire to boil it? Do you have what you need to be able to start the fire to boil that water? All of these kind of go into themselves. Once you boil that water, what sort of filtration system do you have to where you can filter out whatever contaminants are in that water? Because you boiled out the bacteria, great, it's still full of contamination. Do you know how to make a natural filter? They're quite easy. If you don't know how to make one of those, I recommend looking it up. Do you have any, say, plastic bottles with you that you could potentially use for storage? What sort of storage do you actually have with you? What sort of cooking equipment do you have with you? What sort of cleaning stuff do you have with you? Are you going to go out there and get infected in a week from, I don't know, hemorrhoids or something because you didn't bring anything to be able to clean yourself? Or maybe you get botulism because the squirrel that you cooked is still stuck to the pan that you've been using every day for the past week. And it's just beginning to rot. Like, what sort of setup do you have to be able to self-sustain yourself at this particular place? Once you go through your medical supplies, let's say you keep cutting yourself or you keep dealing with blisters or cold or cracked lips or dry skin to the point to where you start really dealing with, bleeding and infection, and you go through your entire tube of Neosporin really, really rapidly, or you have a fever or something like that, and you just go through all of your Dayquil or what is called antibiotics really, really rapidly, how are you going to be able to make more? Do you know how to make penicillin? It's actually quite easy to make penicillin. If you don't know how to make it, I recommend looking it up because, again, it's quite easy. Just make sure that you're doing all of the things properly. This way you can go ahead and make more medicine. Speaking of medicine, the plants that are in your area, do you know what is potentially poisonous? What is harmful? Do you know what is something that you could potentially eat, gather, grow as a crop? Do you know what grows in your area? Did you bring any seeds with you? What sort of agricultural setup do you have set up to where you can do these things? Is the area that you're going, does it have good soil? Maybe it's rocky soil. How often do you get water? The particular place that you're at, is there a river nearby that you could potentially scoop water up from to go to your crops so you don't have to sacrifice any drinking water, etc., etc. There's so many different things that come into consideration for the frontier lifestyle, and there's so much self-sustainment that goes into it. to the point to where you need like literal trucks of supplies just to get started. Oftentimes, whenever people were living on a frontier life, very seldomly did they survive on gathering whatever it is that they were looking to need, because more often than not, you're not going to be able to find and gather what it is that you need. There's a reason why whenever people became self-sustaining through agriculture and whatnot, the human population absolutely exploded. Whenever people started growing their own food and dealing with their own animals and everything along those lines, to where they didn't have to worry about the luck of the hunt giving them what it is that they need. The tools that you bring with you, you need to make sure that they are things that are going to last essentially indefinitely. If you find yourself in a situation where you're living on the frontier and you break something, get sick, have no medication, like you've lasted as long as you possibly can, then you have no choice but to try and get back to the grid that you ran away from, or potentially just end up in the ground. As you get older in that frontier lifestyle, how long are you going to live that frontier lifestyle before you go back to the medical system? How long can you make it without getting, say, cancer, or potentially, I don't know, diabetes, or arthritis that becomes so gosh darn painful that you can't really move yourself as effectively as you used to? Your muscles start to degrade, your eyesight starts to go, hair starts to fall out, you start getting colder as your metabolism slows. It gets more and more difficult to survive out there, which is one of the reasons why people living on the frontier didn't make it past like the age of 60. It's a hard life that has so much more going into it besides just, I'm going to grab XYZ rifle and run out to the woods and survive in the woods. After, say, 6 months where all of your provisions are gone and you are wholeheartedly exhausted trying to build yourself to the point to where you are self-sustaining, which is way, way easier said than done, then I feel like 95% of people would stop fantasizing about the frontier lifestyle and they would start wanting to get back to the grid, because the grid has things like central heating and air conditioning. Just for example, the bugs in Florida, especially in the summertime, are absolutely horrendous. The mosquitoes will just literally, they'll kill you. They really will kill you with how much it is that they swarm you, and the various diseases and whatnot that you might catch from them. They really could be a really bad situation. So take all these things into consideration if you decide to go ahead and go out and live that frontier lifestyle, because there's a lot more that goes into it than what people decide to go ahead and fantasize about. Whenever people fantasize about doing something like dropping everything and going to live in the woods, they think of like the first week, maybe the first month, where they live off their supplies and they go out and they hunt whatever it is that they want, and maybe they start to build themselves a shelter, and then they don't think about the degradation of their body as they do that and how difficult of a task that really is. It's not something that somebody should strive for. It's not something that somebody should want to do. That's my rant on this. I think I've said my piece. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. I do recommend learning how to make yourself a distillery. I think out of everything on the frontier, distilleries are one of the easier tools that you can make with not a whole lot of effort involved, as long as you manage to seal off your water supply so it doesn't evaporate away. You can actually use that same style of distillery if you know how to get your fire to a particular temperature to where you can get alcohol to evaporate without having the water evaporate. This way you can distill alcohol for, say, cleaning wounds or maybe getting tipsy. I know a lot of times whenever I make my own alcohol, I'll stick to like really simple things, like I'll make my own mead or my own beer or something like that, which has a lower alcohol content, and it's much easier to make than trying to distill something else like, say, vodka. So that's my rant on it. Like I said, I already did the outro, I think. Thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you guys later. I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.